Stacey van Groll is Manager Discovery and Access at the University of Queensland, with primary responsibility for the library services platform and Libris products. Stacey's contributions to the Libris user community include 5 years prior service on the ANZREG committee, and she is a current IGeLU Primo Working Group Coordinator. Thank you very much, Stacey, for joining us today to talk about the Primo Back Office to VE virtual feature alignment project.
Oh, thanks, Deborah. And long time no see. Hello. And I'm assuming my slides are okay. So we'll kick off. So as Deborah said, my name is Stacey van Groll and I'm Manager Discovery and Access at the University of Queensland. And I'm also here in my capacity today as the IGeLU Primo Working Group Coordinator. And as part of that, I was the co-lead with a counterpart on the ELUNA Primo Working Group for the Primo Back Office to VE feature alignment project. So I'll run you through the project today in terms of how it started, why we're doing it, in terms of our goals, the timeline overview, people who worked on the project, and I'll go into some nitty-gritty about how we got to where we are now along the way, and then also what's happened since we submitted the final report. And I'll probably take about 20-25 minutes, so I'm very happy for questions from you all. So in terms of the genesis of the project, I thought it might be good to do like a little bit of a Primo history lesson as well, because it does align with some of this overarching themes. So some of this is before my time. So back in May 2007, when Primo was first launched, I wasn't on Primo then. But when it was first launched, it was just on a local server and it was just on the classic UI. So a very tabular sort of display. Then quite a few years later, the option became available to transition to SaaS, cloud hosted, in 2015. And then you'll see the dates here, things start picking up. Things are happening almost every year, basically. So 2016, the new UI became available that we all know and love now. And then just a year after that, Primo VE became available, and that was only on the new UI. So that's another reason people might not be familiar with the classic UI. And then we come into a key period in the second half of 2019 when the Libris said that they were only implementing new Alma Primo sites onto Primo VE. And that's quite key because before then we had a critical mass of people on back office, and now we started to see the shift towards a critical mass on VE and for all the new customers. And then that ticked up a notch again when the Go VE program was launched a year later because of Libris capacity limits to manually switch people over themselves. So once people had the power to do that themselves, then we definitely saw a deluge over to VE. And then I just thought I'd call out that classic UI deprecation because you can see there's like a 5 or 6 year gap there between the new UI and the classic UI. And we arrived at a big red flag of the ELUNA conference last year, which I was funded to attend by the ELUNA steering committee, which I'm very grateful for, because it was a key point where if you're on a working group, you usually will meet with the product managers during these sorts of conferences. And the key topic of that meeting was what they were very interested in, which was how to identify and help and to understand and deliver the key things that would help Primo back office sites to transition to Primo VE. I was very adamant that I didn't want it all to be a consideration that just because someone or a site had moved to Primo VE, that means that they're 100% happy. So they might have moved on balance of consideration, but they might have left treasured features behind, for example. So in this whole body of work, I wanted the whole community to be able to give input into this body of work. So that's what led to number 2 on that list there. And then ultimately, we wanted to help our community by then presenting a prioritised list, because this is all work, right? There's only a finite amount of time to develop different things. So ex Libris, we didn't settle on a number of how many key things that we would deliver to them that then they would commit to deliver. But there was an understanding of that there would be a commitment on both sides that we would do this work, and that they would come to the table to help us to get that Primo VE product development, to get more of our sites onto Primo VE. And I've made a note at the bottom because you might recall that we used the word parity for a long time, whereas it became clear over the years of discussions with ex Libris that they really consider that to mean configuration parity, as in what a library staff member is sitting and ticking a box or writing a normalization rule, where we agreed it's not about that. It's about wanting to maintain for our patrons in our Primo environments the services and features that we want to give them as libraries. So that's the framework, and then this is what we kicked off. So we've got the big red banner of that meeting at ELUNA, and then I've split it into 2 phases, which for those of you who've read the report will see that it aligns with that. So you can think of phase 1 as internal within the project group, and phase 2 as external. So this is where I say as well that we are in a working group, and the key word is work. You're not expected just to get it on your resume. You're actually expected to do things, but it also is like extra. So we have to mix it in with our normal paid jobs, our real jobs. So you might see that there's a lot of months in there where it seems like not too much is happening, but that is just the reality of having to fit things in, and also collaboration with other parties. So this is where I like to give a shout out to Gaith at UNSW. Even though Gaith wasn't officially on the project, he really got me going because he shared with me a template that he did for the transition for UNSW. And that just gave me that little bit of a push with a beautiful, you know, all the right columns, all the things you need. And I took my stream of consciousness documentation that I've been watching and building for years in paying attention to VE development, and I was plugging in all of the things that I'd been logging into that template. Things really got going in October and November after we met at the ELUNA conference. So I tidied up the spreadsheet and shared it with the project group that had been agreed. We had our kickoff meeting. We did have a bit of a downfall that we requested an ex Libris point person for any questions, but they denied that and said that to use the GoVE email instead. But you would notice that timing was a difficult time for Israel, so it's understandable. And we also had the Primo VE normalization hackathon there, so that gave a little impetus to the project as well. Lots of things happened along the way in terms of internal communications as well with ex Libris, like we were flagging likely prioritised items to them, which included my concern about Auslang being languages, which Craig and Yanan talked about yesterday, being more than just Mark, because that wasn't documented at that stage, so it was on my deal breaker list. And then we move into phase 2, where you can see it's a lot more simple, but that basically was us. If any of you who've written a survey know that it's not really an easy thing. So we worked on finalising the survey, getting that out to you all, and then we went into a report writing phase. Okay, and so these are specifically the people who were involved with the project. So it was the ELUNA Primo working group and the IGeLU Primo working group. And I suppose our creds are important, that we'd all worked with Back Office, all of it extensively, not just for a short time. Half of us have gone now to VE, and another 2 are in enablement phase. And we also had 3 members who have worked with consortia, which is an important piece because they often have quite specialised needs. I don't know if we have any consortia in Australia and New Zealand since Unilink disbanded. Perhaps someone can note that in the comments. And just for the sake of completeness, if anyone hasn't seen it, or for reference, this is where the report is. It's a whopping 27 pages, and then there's even more links to additional supporting documents. And I also wanted to share the ELUNA presentation by my co-lead. That was done in mid-May. So that's Karina Batzik, and she did the hard yards for the survey analysis, whereas I took point more on the report writing. So her presentation is a good one, which goes through iteratively through all the survey analysis. So I'm not rehashing what Karina's done. So feel free to have a look at that at your leisure. I will go into it at a higher level though, just to scope, of course, what I'm presenting to you today. So our, phase 1 internal work, basically, we had, more than 85 rows of data that we were working with. I want to emphasize that it still wasn't exhaustive. I've already had an ex-Libris staff member say to me that, well, the community doesn't think that important because it wasn't on the recent report. And I had to point out with them that I actually wrote that line and I said that it was not exhaustive. So that can be a struggle with these sorts of things. So we did a lot of internal work to make it reasonable for the community to fill out a survey. So we did things like move individual line items to the use case document for one of the key items. Some things we identified was only a transition issue. Some things it was possible to customize it, or there might have been a reasonable workaround, which caused some debate, as you imagine. And some things were already developed in product, as you can imagine as well. Lists grow over time, and there were Primo VE releases all the time. And then we put in our own flavour and opinions about what might be high impact, medium impact, and low impact, and to see if the community would agree with that. And then in terms of the outcomes, so I've just got some of the demographic sort of information here that we had 120 responses from 105 sites across 16 countries. So in terms of the model, understandably, because of the critical mass of shift, most of the sites were VE, but 2/3 of those had shifted from back office. We had about a half-half split with consortia, and I just wanted to flag that we did have a survey flaw that I insisted that all questions would be mandatory at the last minute, because you hate to get results and people have skipped questions, because that really doesn't help with your analysis. But then we'd ask questions like, what's your LMS if you were on back office? But ultimately you can see that only one person said that they were on Sierra, so everyone else was on Alma. So we did have some interesting results. We had included some things on the survey that caused debate, again, because we considered them to be more like basic system capabilities, like how quickly results are returned, for example. So it was interesting to see how prioritised those things were. And we didn't want to shut down that community voice, nor did we want to lose the opportunity for product development with this work. So that's why we ultimately split the report into 4 infrastructure concerns and 4 feature capabilities. We also had to account for multiple site submissions because, again, I wanted everyone to be able to have a say, such as if you didn't agree with your systems librarian about what was important. And we also gave a little boost to the input from remaining back office sites, because that's obviously one of the primary premise of the project. And I also begged the indulgence of the project group to do a special flag for external source records in collection discovery. I'm endlessly kicking myself about not including it in the survey, and I did that on the basis of it being on the roadmap. But then, of course, I noted that it was on the roadmap last year as well and fell off. So I made sure to include that as a special item. So in terms of how the results fell, so you'll be familiar with this if you've read the report, but I've just flagged the feature capabilities and infrastructure concerns on the right. And so this is what we emphasised in the report versus how it all washed out from the results. Now, I don't go into too much detail anymore further than this slide about consortia, because it is a separate piece which I don't have really many updates on, but I wanted to flag that we did also have 4 items for consortia that we flagged from the separate questions asked of them. So, and in terms of next steps, so just continuing that timeline a bit, we submitted the report on the 30th of April. Then that was only 2 weeks before the ELUNA conference in mid-May. And my ELUNA, I didn't attend this year, but my ELUNA counterparts said that basically Libris said that they hadn't had an opportunity to read it in depth yet, which is kind of understandable because they're busy preparing for ELUNA, right? We were also in the pointing and scoping phase for the Primo 2024 enhancements, which must be prioritised. It's the #1 thing that working groups do. And we did have some wins from this product, body of work out of that, which I'll go into. But now we're chasing them for a dedicated meeting about this report, because it really hasn't been acknowledged much at all other than in minor verbal discussions because of our other priorities. So we did request that meeting for the first time on 24th of May, and that's yet to happen. But we're trying to get perhaps for early July. So we will be going into, as I mentioned, we've had some wins on the 2024 enhancements. So the number 9,000, for example, was #1 on the survey and in the report. And I'll be chasing them like mad when the ELUNA conference is coming up. I did also chase them eagerly as hard for that collection discovery item I flagged. It took me 2 months to get an answer if that would be in the August or the November release. And I've got an answer of currently planned for November. So that makes me a bit nervous, but at least I've got that. And then the big red flag next is the end of 2024 for the plans to be made for the 2025 roadmap, because we need these items to be on that 2025 roadmap. Otherwise, I start to question what I'm doing with my life. So brace yourself. I've got 2 more slides, but they're big ones. So this one, I'm going through the updates thus far for the infrastructure concerns. So again, I've got at the top where they all fell in the raw results, and then how we highlighted them in the report. So we have had some responses from ex-Libris. Some of them I'll call excuses at this stage, like the search performance. They tend to blame this on sites that aren't yet live with VE, but if you do comparisons using the bookmarklet code, you can see that VE is slower. Outages, they're saying that it's not always both of them at this stage, but I've never seen an outage for Primo VE and ALMA that's not in alignment. And they said that there's no technical way to configure that horrible ALMA outage page. Ghost records are seen as both not expected and expected at the same time. And I think that that's just a little bit of not good enough to think it's okay to present a record to patrons and it's okay because it will disappear next time. And in collection discovery, some of the work that I've been doing in my own GoVE process, I noticed that there's a different URL that you see via ALMA's collection view in discovery. And I'm theorising that some of the reports from community members about slow results for updates for collection discovery is because they're checking via view and discovery. And ex-Libris have confirmed that there is different timing. It doesn't account for all the people who said that they have to wait weeks and put in cases, but I suspect that might be part of it. And this one's my last one, and it's a big one, even bigger. So this is the feature capabilities and where they fell. Now, you might see the screenshots a bit smaller because I wanted to include the long tail. I've already talked about the #1 item on the survey being aligned with the #7 item on the 2024 vote. We secured agreement from ex-Libris that there would be no points required for this, and also that there would be something with roadmap commitment in 2025. It's just that we don't know exactly the form that would take yet. We can't put that as a deliverable on an enhancement, like a winner, because as a working group, we have to have a complete firm scope, and then Ex Libris has to deliver on that, and then we have to tick a box and say that's been delivered. So it could not stay within the enhancements process. I've noted some other ones there that are aligned. So the number 2 in the enhancements process was also high on this list, that as a use case within number 8C. So sorry, things get a bit complicated when you're juggling all of this. So that is a win, but it also doesn't include the facet counts, which came 11th in the survey in the scoping. We did have some other wins we finally got the database search A to Z, which you can see is on the drop-off point for the survey results, but it's been on the enhancements process for several years now. And I wanted to note that that number 1 item this year was actually, I submitted it last year and it was rejected. So fingers crossed that we get a good piece out of that research and consultation item. We've also had some more correspondence with Ex Libris last December as the internal work progressed, about these pieces, you know, the top 2 of editing out of the box and more fields, more local fields. So at this stage, just summarising everything, you know, we've done a massive body of work to get this feedback from the community. Hopefully we've managed to express your voice well in the report that we've submitted, and we're starting to get updates from Ex Libris, but we're definitely wanting to get more and soon. So happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Hi, Stacey. We've only really got one question so far, and that was from me. So I was just curious, with the new Primo discovery experience coming at some point, did that sort of change the way that your group approached your project with the alignment? Did you sort of have to reassess? Yeah.
Yes. So if you recall back to the first where I was mapping out that ELUNA meeting, I've got VE/NDE, the next discovery experience. So that was the first mention of the next discovery experience coming. And at that point, I had a meeting with Guy Benprat at that ELUNA conference, and he was alluding to the fact that it would likely only be on Primo VE. So, and for any of you who looked, and I mentioned it in the report quite extensively, about the difference in the roadmaps between Back Office and VE this year, as in 5 pages versus 10, and the 4 pillars of the next discovery experience, which is linked open data, analytics, the UI, and AI only being on VE. Well, they won't put this in writing yet, but they'll say later for Back Office. And for me, like, the writing is on the wall. So I've been advocating for years, literally years now, to get more Primo VE product development, and we've come a very long way. Like, originally you couldn't edit basically anything. Like, you couldn't even edit the out-of-the-box display rules, for example, and we've achieved that together. But I'm pushing even harder now, because I want to support everyone to feel comfortable and not have to sacrifice anything in order to get those benefits for what's coming next. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. So we just had some comments. Sean would like to say thank you for the advocacy and persistence, Stacey and the team. We went to VE August last year, and a lot of this feedback echoes our feedback and observations to date. And Hugh Rundle also would like to say thank you for your work, Stacey. And yeah, Catherine said, this is interesting as someone who's only ever worked with VE. It's easy to not know what you're missing out on. And that's the same for me, because we just went straight to VE.
Yeah, and I fully recognise that. It's not about downplaying anyone's experience, because if you don't know and experience something, that's completely understandable. But for those of us who have experienced back office, and you know, people will say that they were glad to say goodbye to it because it's so complex, and you know, there's a lot of different areas, but with complexity also brings power. And you can do a lot with it. And I just basically want to see that same power and ability for all of our library staff to present a Primo environment that they want for their patrons, not what Ex Libris decides for us.
Thanks very much, Stacey. We don't have any other questions.